Mr. Crow, candidates have long talked about making cuts in the federal government if elected. Where would you begin if you're elected to cut federal government? What's on the table? What's off the table?
Well, everything would be on the table. Something I've said over and over again, I do not believe this country's ever going to get on the right track. We have got some guys in there, they've got a really cool franchise. They're loaning money to the United States. Most of the national debt of the $15 trillion is owed to the Federal Reserve, and this goes to individuals. I could give you their names, but I'm not going to. They're getting like $400 billion when interest rates are low. You send interest rates up to 20%, and they really get a lot of. You're talking about $400 billion you could cut off right there if you got rid of the Federal Reserve. And that would be, you know, the first thing that I would do, except maybe, you know, try to, you know, go into impeaching Obama if he's still around. But I think, but anything, I mean, I've been a small businessman all my life. I mean, you talk about cutting light bulbs off and this, that, and the other. I've saved money on everything. But I mean, the education department, I think that would be a good one to get rid of. And I mean, I would go through everything. If there was a way to cut expenses, I would just be anti-everything. I mean, anti-spending money if I could. But I still believe in Social Security contributions. People that don't, I just see that is a big mistake. All right, thank you.
Mr. Crow, thank you. Senator Rouser, candidates often talk about making cuts in federal government if elected. If you're elected, sir, where would you begin if to make cuts in the federal government? What's on the table? What's off the table?
Good question, and it's a good question that every candidate should answer. You know, when I served in the executive branch for about a year and a half, you know, I learned how the bureaucrats operated. It gives me a lot of insight into how to defund them and get rid of them. When I went over to the Department of Energy one day, you walk down the hall, and most of them who are drawing six-figure salaries are sitting there reading books and reading magazines. Ladies and gentlemen, we can devolve, get rid of the Department of Energy, and move some of those responsibilities back to the states. The Department of Commerce, same thing. HUD, Housing and Urban Development, known as HUD, same thing. Department of Education. If you look at the decline of education in this country, it started when the federal government got involved with it. That's another agency. And you know, there's been a lot of talk about the Paul Ryan plan, and I applaud Paul Ryan. I think he's a great member of Congress. But there's one issue that I have with the Paul Ryan budget, and that's the fact that it doesn't balance the budget until 2040. 2040. It's almost 30 years from now. We don't have that kind of time. We need to be eliminating wholesale departments of the federal government. We need to be tackling Medicaid. And one of the ways you can handle Medicaid is block grant those monies to the state. You know, as a state legislature, Medicaid is killing us this year. Carolyn Justice and I, when we go back to the legislature, we got almost a $400 million deficit to deal with, all because of Medicaid. We have to make cuts, and we have to make them now, and we got to reform the government.
Thank you, sir.
We are now going to turn it over to the candidates. And remember, what we're going to do here is that you have an opportunity to ask a question of another candidate. Please keep your question to 30 seconds, and the candidate will keep their answer to 90 seconds. Now, I also need to tell you that you're going to have 2 minutes for closing remarks, so that you keep that in mind as you're formulating the question, that if there was a question you wanted to rebut, you could do it in your closing and not at this point. And so we're going to start with you, Mr. Crow. You have the opportunity to ask another candidate a question. Keep your question to 30 seconds.
Okay, could you give me a second to find my question, because I wrote one down. I've written a couple of them down, but I didn't know y'all were going to get it this quick.
Neither did we. Would you like me to go to another candidate until you do? Okay, next in line would be Senator Rouser.
Well, thank you very much. My question would be directed to Mr. Pantano. You know, during the course of this campaign, and we've heard a lot about great platitudes and theory and work history and so forth. My question is, what specific problem have you dealt with, and what solution did you bring to the table to solve it?
In a decade in the private sector with Fortune 100 businesses, as a consultant working with companies like Sony, Mattel, AT&T, or my time as an energy trader working at Goldman Sachs in the global markets of oil, natural gas, heating oil, and electricity. My time in the battle space, first as a young Lance Corporal in Desert Storm, later as a sniper team leader off the coast of Yugoslavia, later after watching the attack of September 11th. Maybe then I saw a problem of our country being attacked by jihadists that had slit the throats of stewardesses and bound their hands with zip ties. And I guess then my decision was a decision that millions upon millions of men and women have made at various times in our country's history. And I sought to solve the problem with my body, with my heart. As Isaiah 6:8 says, send me. So when I stepped up and was an infantry platoon commander leading Marines in Fallujah in 2004, we were solving about 1 million problems a day. In the time I've worked after that, solved crises, solved problems, I guess one of the problems that I have to handle is how to be a compassionate father that loves his children, that wants to give them what they want, and yet knows that it's the very act of me disciplining them and not giving them those things that can be the challenge and provide them that better upbringing. That's a challenge and a problem that I try and solve every day.
Thank you, Mr. Pantano.
Thank you.
Mr. Crow?
Got my question right here. Mike McIntyre, and we're out to beat him, Mike McIntyre voted against cutting Social Security. I'm asking Mr. Pantano this question. He voted against cutting Social Security contributions. And as you know, he can bring this subject up occasionally. And realizing Social Security withholding has been reduced by 2%. If you would if elected, would you vote to reinstate the contributions, increase Social Security contributions 2% to the previous level?
I would look at Social Security in the context, and you've heard these expressions before, our basket of entitlements. And I agree with Mr. Crow that it's not appropriate to have labeled Social Security an entitlement, especially when people pay into it. But it's something that we use to describe this growing debt bomb. Because when we talk about the $16 trillion that we face in debt, that's the securitized debt that's been bought and sold and traded. We face a $60 trillion unsecured debt, which is the liability for these programs, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Social Security needs to be reformed. I'm not going to speak to a specific up or down vote. I'm not familiar enough with the specific vote that you're talking about. I will say that as somebody that has taken a position and has been willing to take a position in support of a particular plan, that support has cost me. When we hear career politicians answer or ask questions and evade actually taking a stand on where is it, what budget would they support, what would they do, the Paul Ryan budget addresses these things. And I point to that because this is a program that the Democrats have been attacking. In fact, our Star News attacked it with cartoons, attacked it with Paul Krugman editorials. They suggest that the Republicans are trying to balance the books of Social Security on the back of the poor, and this kind of demagoguery continues. And so I've taken a stand in support of this budget, and it does a number of things to address the solvency of Social Security. We look at individual retirement accounts as an option. The idea that you or all of you pay in, you ought to be able to keep some of that. There's more. Go to our website. Thank you.
And now, Mr. Pantano, you may ask a question.
Mr. Crow, as we've discussed, I have some experience in the energy markets. I've seen price action. I've seen when Saddam Hussein rattled his sabers, the price of oil would go up. And then I knew that he had people that were selling it on the global markets. We've seen Iran threaten to close the Straits of Hormuz, and it affects oil prices. Mr. Crow, my question is to you because you have some experience in the retail sale of gasoline. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you would do specifically to bring the cost at the pump down for us? I'd like to hear your ideas. In fact, I want to bring in all of these great ideas, God willing, when we go to Congress, whoever that is, but that's my question specifically for you, sir.
Okay, I think that the reason that we have high prices at the pump, and Mike can be to blame for, there's several things. One of them is there's a shortage of refineries, which he voted against permitting or allowing refineries to be built. We need more refineries. That is affecting it. But I really believe that there is price fixing out there, and I believe that part of the game plan of Big Oil is they make a lot of money. I just noticed that Exxon took in their cash flow was $66 billion last year. They are not broke, but when we go to Libya and we're taking oil off the market, we are hurting ourselves because it's increasing the price at the pump. So one thing that I would do, and there is plenty of oil around. Iraq, for instance, has increased its production to 2.7 million barrels a day. One time it was 4.5. They're saying it's going to go to 15 million barrels a day. We're almost current right now. There's no reason for our oil to be as high as it is with natural gas at $2 an MCF. To me, it relates to going into countries and taking oil off the market and price fixing. So I'd break up oil companies. Exxon would be in the littlest pieces. They couldn't even find it. I would make one gasoline truck owned by Exxon and one by Shell. They would be splintered to help bring the prices down.
Thank you, sir. Gentlemen, we are going to move on to our closing remarks, and as Representative Justice had said earlier, we're going to extend the period of time for your closing remarks to 2 minutes each. So a timekeeper will want to do 2 minutes on the closing remarks. And this will give you a chance to maybe potentially rebut anything that anybody may have brought up earlier. And we're going to go in reverse order of the opening statement. So for, ladies and gentlemen, for his closing statement this evening, candidate Ilario Pantano. Mr. Pantano.
I applaud all of you for being here tonight. Democracy, freedom, it's like sausage. Everybody likes it and nobody wants to know how it's made. This is how it's made. You taking your time on a school night to come out to hear, to compare, to stand for one candidate or another, to work for them, to advocate an idea. I salute you all, whatever team you're on, because in the end, there's only going to be one team and we will all work together. This will get sorted out in 3 weeks, and then we will be unified to move forward to take our country back. I'm confident of that. I'm running for Congress for 4 reasons. 3 of them, I have a bouncing microphone. 3 of them are things that I want to do when I get to Washington, God willing. 1 of them is something that I want to do to Washington. The 3 things are grow our economy. We can do that by reducing taxes, reducing regulation, getting rid of Obamacare. Sarbanes-Oxley, for example, has cost us 10 million jobs and lost IPOs. Think about that. Think about the fact that businesses have not hired because of the looming threat of Obamacare that adds 160 new agencies. I believe that we have to protect our homeland. That's sometimes even from our friends. Can everybody see what this is? This is China Daily. This is a free newspaper in all the economic centers in the country. It's given out for free, and from time to time you will see full-page advertorials in the Wall Street Journal. It looks like any other newspaper you've ever seen. In fact, if you turn your TV set on, China has a cable network. It's paid for by the Chinese government. Friends, there's a lot of messaging going on. We need people that understand the international issues that can see through some of that. In 2020, the Chinese will have the only manned space station above this planet. We don't. Today, the shuttle Discovery just landed to be put in the Smithsonian. Protecting the homeland doesn't just mean putting up walls. It means looking at the future threats, the ones that you haven't even heard of yet. I've got the scars to prove I'm serious about that. Preserving our conservative values, the preservation of marriage and the unborn,
And finally, principled leadership. Term limits would end the culture of lobbyist corruption in Washington, and I want your help to implement them. Thank you very much.
Mr. Brentano, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, for our closing statement next, we will go to Senator David Rouser. Senator Rouser, 2 minutes.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure to be here with you tonight, and I want to address a couple things that came up a little earlier. Yes, I did go and raise PAC money for Jesse Helms, and I did so because he asked me to. He was in a tough re-election in 1996. Helms races are always tough re-elections. And I'd go tomorrow and raise money for Jesse Helms if it meant he could come back from the grave and go back to the U.S. Senate. If he was back in the U.S. Senate, we wouldn't have this mess today. So I am proud of my service for Senator Helms. I'm grateful for the opportunity that I had to work for him and to learn from him. And speaking on the immigration issue, you know, my opponent fails to mention that Senator Helms was a co-sponsor of the very bill that he attacked me for. Not the same year, but almost the exact identical legislation. In 1999, Senate Bill 1814. The tobacco quota buyout, I'm proud of my work there too. My opponent may not understand how important that was for Eastern North Carolina and North Carolina in general. This state would be in a depression if we hadn't been able to get that achieved. And then finally, let me say, there's been much said about what I've done. The reason why I've done what I've done over the years was to help solve problems. When I left the Bush administration, some tobacco companies came to me. They said, David, they're trying to shove FDA regulation of tobacco down our throats. As a conservative, I was grateful to step forward and help to try to keep that from happening. Same thing on the immigration issue. The farmers came to me and said, David, we have a huge problem in this state. We can't get the labor that we need. I wasn't going to turn my back on them. My entire career, I've helped focus on solutions. This country needs people to step forward today that are focused on solutions, have the know-how to get it done. With my training under Senator Helms, with my experience in the state legislature, you have a good, strong, conservative record to look at. And you can ask anybody I've ever served with how I have achieved. I want this country to succeed. I want to prevail. The conservative cause must prevail if we're going to return to the principles of free enterprise and limited government. Thank you, and may God bless America.
Thank you, sir. And now for his closing statement this evening, we will go to Mr. Randy Crowe. Mr. Crowe, 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Some may say I'm an also-ran and loser because I've lost 18 of 19 races I've entered. Yes, I would be if the country was improving, but the country has been going downhill since I ran. Then the national debt was $4.5 trillion, now it's over $15 trillion. Gasoline $1 a gallon, now $4. 11 million illegal immigrants. The Attorney General says killing Americans, legal, constitutional. The military can engage in civilian law enforcement, indefinitely holding Americans without charges. Sheriff Arpaio proved to me Obama's long-form birth certificate and draft cards are fakes. Excuse me, but in the world we live, winning is losing and losing is winning. Say no to collectivism. May they please vote for me, Randy Crowe. The better I do, the better things are doing. Collectivism, a definition of collectivism is an individual has reality only as part of a group and only value insofar as he or she serves it. Pretty depressing. Send me to Washington, I'll do what's constitutional, best for the district, what you tell me to do, and not what money says. Congress reduced Social Security withholding a third last year. That means Social Security has $240 billion less this year to pay its bills. This guarantees Social Security and seniors that depend on it will be insolvent one day unless contributions are reinstated. Mike voted against cutting Social Security. I'll vote to reinstate Social Security contributions and thus have a layup to beat Mike in November. Say no to collectivism. Please vote for me, Randy Crowe, citizen politician, and watch the 1% free riders head for the hills. Thank you.